This segment is brought to you by Crashplan.
This is a lot of toys here.
Yeah.
And you just get to play with these every day.
Pretty much, yeah. It's a lot of fun.
Pretty sweet gig. I was hoping that maybe you could give me a kind of an idea of what the basics are when it comes to satellite broadband. The idea of never being, without a connection.
Okay. You want to talk satellite broadband, or you want to talk just data in general?
Well, yeah. Let's just talk about data. Like, as long as I can get an SSH session back to my box, I don't care.
Okay. You might be able to do an SSH session even over a handheld, although I wouldn't recommend it because, you're going to have that phone kind of sitting.
What is this guy?
This is Iridium's latest handheld phone. So it's a satellite phone with your capability of doing data as well. You can do 2.4 kilobits per second.
2.4 kilobits. That's something. I mean, that'll give you a little telnet or SSH action.
Yeah.
So how does that differ from some of the others? I mean, is 2.4 kilobits per second what you would come to expect from satellite, or it gets better from there?
It gets better from there. Actually, it gets worse from there, too.
No way. It gets worse than that?
So in Marsat's version of the handheld phone, this guy here, this guy does 2.4, this does 1.2.
1.2 kilobits per second.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. So now that we've seen the extreme bad end of the scale, where does it go from there?
So it would go up to actually Globalstar's phone, to be honest.
Okay.
You're doing about 4.8 kilobits per second on that guy when you're in service.
What's the issue with getting service with Globalstar? Is it just because their satellites fall out of the sky, or did they just stop working?
They had a real bad. They lost most of their satellites initially.
Those poor guys. What happened? Were they the ones that had the head-on collision with the Russian satellite, or?
No, actually, I think it was solar flares that burnt them.
Ouch.
Yeah, they didn't have enough protection on their birds, and I don't know the specifics on it, but that's what I was told was they just lost their birds.
Oops. Now you say airtime. What do you mean by airtime?
You're paying per minute when you do handheld phones.
Oh, I see. So when you do data on these, even though they're only kilobytes per second, you're paying by the minute, not the megabyte.
Yes, that's actually the hang up that a lot of people have on this is, when you start talking about costs for doing data over satellite communications, they see that, we can buy a Globalstar phone for $700 and I'm paying about $1 a minute or what have you. Ouch. People aren't able to equate, I'm able to transfer this much data at a minute versus I'm paying $12 a meg on something like a fleet broadband terminal.
I mean, are any of the broadband solutions for satellite at the point where I could reliably say oh, this is a good solution for me to go around the world and upload HD video?
The hard part with doing that is, yes, there is a valuable way to do it. VSAT is actually a very good means of doing your transfer costs. So you're paying less than $1 a meg on VSAT, but you're paying about 15 grand up for equipment. Yeah, the domes are about the size of that Iridium dome there on up. Mm-hmm. You've seen news vans and whatnot with a big dish on them.
Yeah.
Chances are that's a VSAT dish and not a. So.
Huh. And so, where's kind of the sweet spot, the in between, the not $15,000 up front, but still for when I need data and I'm out of 3G coverage area, I kind of want to just go to the boonies, but still get my email.
BGAN's a very good solution for that because of the size of the terminal, so it's packable. You have really good transfer rates.
Right, so I mean, my hacker mind is okay, yes, I'd be using my Linux box with only SSH going out. I'd have restrictive IP tables rules, and it'd be making the most out of every megabyte, mainly just using SSH or Mosh or some other, to get to server in the cloud to do fun stuff. Wouldn't necessarily pop it on my Windows box and have Windows Update kill everything. But yeah, I mean, so with these terminals, it's rather than the phones where it's by the minute. It's what, by the meg?
By the meg. Yeah, you're paying per meg. So, for example, you've got the BGANs, like the mobile broadband satellite terminals. You've got kind of more of a fixed installation unit, like this is our Inmarsat's Maritime terminal. It uses the same satellites as the BGANs, but it's a tracking dome. So
this is a tracking dome right here?
This is the below deck unit, the antenna. I can show you the antenna outside.
Is it like this? Is it like a dome?
It's a dome, but it's a little bit smaller.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So you put the dome on the mast, and then you put this guy down in the ship, and then you've got your awesome handset. So you were saying that BGAN though being the sweet spot. What is BGAN? That's it's a technology from Inmarsat, but who are they, and what is BGAN, and how does it differ from, say, Iridium? Because before I looked into all of this stuff, Iridium was the only constellation of satellites for voice and data that I was even aware of.
Okay. It goes into things like their satellite constellations themselves. So whereas Iridium is polar orbiting, you've got 66 birds up there. Inmarsat only has 3, and they're geostationary. They're way up there. It's like 2,200 miles above the equator. And so it's, instead of your phone either being an omnidirectional or like your antenna where it's kind of omnidirectional and it's facing different directions and whatnot, you're having to aim these towards the satellite. But once you've got it aimed, you're able to pull, on a class 3, 192 kilobits all the way up to a class 1, which is 262.
So some significant bandwidth. Yeah. So it's kind of like the difference between like with Wi-Fi, an omnidirectional antenna versus a directional antenna. Obviously, the directional one's going to get you better.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But you have to point it. Yeah. And so the reason being is because the Inmarsat constellation of satellites are at a higher orbit.
Well, that's how they function. Is they're at a higher orbit because in order to get better coverage on a geostationary, you have to get the satellite farther out so that it's able to spread its spot beam its beam out.
So each of these satellites sees a third of the world.
Right. Right. So you've got the U.S. is sitting, I want to say, right at the equator, just off the coast of South America-ish.
Okay.
And it's broadcasting, north and south at that point.
Wow.
So
that's one satellite that covers the whole region.
Mm-hmm. And you've got, if you want to go into the technology of it, they've got what they call wide beams. So they take the whole beam that the satellite hits on the globe, and they divide it out to wide beams, which cover specific regions.
Yeah.
And then
so like regions the size of states or collections of states.
Collections of states, I would say, yeah. And then when you boot up your terminal and you're going through the aiming sequence on it, that's what you're actually registering to is the wide beam.
Okay.
And then when you
the wide beam is just there as a register beam, just like a here's where I am beam?
Right.
Oh, I see.
And then when you actually get into where you're transferring data, it switches from the wide beam to a spot beam, which is a much more narrow pipe.
So you're saying that the actual satellite, what is it, like filled with hundreds of these spot beams? Do they actually like move and kind of like change their orientation based on where you are connecting?
No, it's just more of resource allocation. So if you were to ever look at the actual antenna on the satellite, it's kind of a honeycomb shaped kind of antenna to it, but it's really kind of more back end and resource allocation. So each spot beam has its own channel and its own bandwidth. It's kind of similar to, you could say, something like a cable network, where your bandwidth is shared among other nodes in that beam. So you've got a theoretical throughput, but it's actually shared among.
And so I guess then they have like a maximum throughput or a maximum like concurrent connections kind of issue.
Right.
Yeah. And you're saying that there's different classes of the what differentiates the different classes?
Basically the strength of the antenna. So you've got a class 3, which is about the size of this guy here. This isn't actually an Inmarsat terminal, but it's about the size, all the way up to class 1s like these two guys here. And it's really just their the strength of the antenna and how large the terminal is because of that.
Is that heavy?
Not really. It's about 3 to
And
4
so
pounds.
is it just that this has more antenna fixtures, or how does that work?
Just it's higher
Is it
dB.
kind of like MIMO, or is it just that it's got higher transmit power?
It's just got higher transmit power.
Okay, that's pretty cool. So how do you most efficiently use your signal? Because if you're paying by the megabyte, obviously anything that you can do at the head end to kind of reduce that is going to be, worth whatever cost.
True. And see, that's where our side of the business comes into play. We're an equipment and airtime provider. So, we're able to supply Iridium airtime, Inmarsat airtime, Global Star, what have you. But we also do back-end solutions. So you can do something like the optimizer is the base model units, just a little mini router, OpenWRT based. You can plug in one of the handsets to it, and it's got the drivers built in to run any of the handsets. And you can do things like mail. We have a specialized mail service that does batch compression. Mm-hmm. So it's a store and forward type of setup to it. You have an application that runs on your computer that acts as your mail client's mail server, quote unquote.
I see. So it can speak the same protocol and everything that it's used to, mm-hmm. but really it's just talking to your device that it's going to then go and fetch everything in the most optimum way.
Right. So when you're ready to transfer, you just hit start and it goes through the dialing sequence for the handhelds or telling the terminals via AT commands to start a session. And it goes through and transfers and...
Oh, that makes a lot of sense, because this device right here, you just Wi-Fi over to it, mm-hmm. do your thing, and since it's connected to like the serial on some of these devices, then you've got, even though you've got really low bandwidth, you should be able to use
it.
Everything's like, a G-zip or something, like
mm-hmm.
super compressed, and then goes to a server on the other end that's expecting that kind of stuff.
Uh-huh.
That's pretty cool.
So we've got both a mail service and we started with Maritime, so mail and weather was big for Maritime. What's the weather going to be like for this trip or what have you. In fact,
is it because it's too expensive to pull up, weather.com or NOAA.com or whatever?
If you can.
Oh, I see.
I mean, a lot of times the Maritime guys aren't really running terminals. You'll see bigger ships or people with a little bit more money running the higher equipment, but most of the time you see people running just handsets.
Really?
So, yeah.
That's the majority of,
the majority of personal users will do handsets just because they don't want to pay the upfront cost.
Are these less expensive,
mm-hmm.
the handsets?
Yeah.
What do those run?
Global Star, you're going to be paying roughly about, I want to say about $700. Same with the Inmarsat handheld. Iridiums, you're going to pay about $1,100 for the 9555, the older rendition, and then the 9575 you're paying about $1,500.
Okay. And that's considerably less expensive than some of these bigger, broadband terminals?
Right. Inmarsat won't actually let you run these over water. You can.
What?
It's because.
Oh, can they tell?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They can tell.
Oh, I guess every device that registers, obviously their satellite knows where it is, mm-hmm. and then they use GPS or...
Well, the satellite picks, the terminal itself picks up a GPS fix so that it knows what satellite it's going to be registering to and what spot beam and wide beam it's going to be going to.
So they don't let you use these overseas?
No, you have to actually go to a Maritime terminal for it.
Why is it? Just because it's like a business model thing, or is there a technical reason why?
I think it's more... meeting country laws and what have you, because there's actually some countries where you have to notify them that you've got a satellite communication so they can monitor what you're doing, type of thing. So,
right. Yeah, like how Osama bin Laden was using Iridium phones, and all the fun wiretapping that goes on with that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I think there's some of that in play. I don't really know the specifics because Inmarsat really doesn't tell us, but of course. But yeah, I think it's probably business model related too. And generally, when you're sitting on a boat, the last thing you want to do is be trying to run your boat and aim a terminal anyway. So you go to a Maritime unit and you've got an active tracking antenna that's tracking the satellite.
Right, because with a boat, you know, pitching and everything, trying to keep that thing level isn't as much fun. So it makes sense that, you know, such domes exist. So what's inside? What's like under the dome? This being an example of just a typical dome with an array of antennas or whatever have you.
Again, it differs depending on the satellite constellation setup. So on the Inmarsat one, you've actually got an active antenna where it's got a 4-axis, up, down, left, right, and it's taking and looking at the signal basically like what you would be doing manually, you know, and trying to find the best signal. And what it does when you first boot it up, it does a 360 pan and then an up and down, so it kind of registers where it's at, and then it starts looking for the bird. As soon as it finds it, it locks on and just kind of tracks it at that point.
So then you can start tilting it, and it compensates.
And it compensates for everything on it, yeah. So you can do a 360 turn, you can roll, pitch, what have you. It'll track it.
That's pretty cool.
And then, you know, Iridium, they just get by with a kind of an omnidirectional-ish type of antenna just by pointing antennas over.
Multiple antennas.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you have like several different antennas in here, all pointed all over the place.
7 panels in there.
Oh, okay.
So they're actual panels about a size, and they're just aimed in different directions.
Sure. You were telling me about the optimizer. What is this guy?
So these are, from the optimizer, you go on up to other type of solutions depending on what you're wanting to do with your satellite communications. We've got a router called the 202, which is the next level up from the optimizer. And it's got pfSense based, and it's got Squid built into it, so you can do, it's kind of manual failover and that you just unplug and plug in, but it's also got USB ports in it too, so you can run the handhelds. And you know, so you can set up firewalls to block traffic that you don't want to occur.
Like Windows Update? Like
Windows Update or Skype. I mean, we've had some people that ran Skype on their satellite thing because they could, then they look at their bill and they're like,
because you end up running as a supernode or something, and you're, you know, transferring other people's data. I mean, they don't do that anymore. They changed the model, but yeah, that kind of stuff. Well, this is all fascinating. I just love the idea that, like, how far we've come in the last, 10 years. You know.
They're still launching satellites. I mean, Globalstar just got done launching their replacement constellation. Iridium's in the works to launching a what they call the Next service, and the pilot here will be able to use it as well. So they'll see a transfer broadband increase, a bandwidth increase on it.
I think out of all of these, the one that I just like the most, as far as like the hacker aspect, is just these Brits, the Inmarsat guys who are just like, you know what, let's just do this with 3 satellites and call it a day.
It's definitely efficient. I mean, you know, they've got a really good service to them. So.
I wonder how much of that is tied to the cost of, you know, the megabytes, and that it's not a technical limitation why Iridium couldn't be faster or whatever. It's just you know, kind of like a business thing. You know, when you've got 66, you know, satellites to maintain versus 3.
You also got to keep in mind when the birds were launched too. So Iridium's birds have been up there quite a while now.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. It was like the mid '90s when it was like such a big deal, and also it's like it seems overly complicated because they're not in a geostationary orbit. Mm-hmm. So at any given point in time, you can actually see. You know, if we stood outside for long enough, we'd see an Iridium flare. Mm-hmm. It would just happen.
Well, and yeah, and even the interlinking between them too, because you have to have a ground station for it to talk to you.
Right.
So it's your transfer rate's going up to a bird, but then it's got to come back down to Earth in order to be able to get through the rest of the network.
Yeah, it's crazy too, because since they're all moving in different directions, they speak to each other over free space optics.
Yep.
Which is like, what?
It's like Ka band, I think, is what they use for it, like, for their interlink.
I think it might be microwave, but either way,
I've actually got a diagram. It's a Ka band across from satellite to satellite and then back down to.
It's just overly complex.
Yeah,
it's like, wow. Let's make access points that move and then mesh while they move. All right, well, thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, not a problem.
Yeah, where can people find out more about Ocens?
Website, we've got www.ocens.com. Phone, 206-878-8270.
There you go. Flood of calls.
Sure.
Google Voice is free. Nifty stuff, man. Thank you. I love playing with all the toys here.
Yeah, not a problem.
Your backups should be private, like really private. None of this bogus, we store your private key in the cloud for you nonsense, or more recently with the whole intelligence agency backdoors. No, I mean true privacy, backed by sound crypto, and with a key that never leaves your system. We've been talking about it for years here on Hak5, secure ways to do backups, and furthermore, I've personally been a customer of our newest sponsor, Crashplan, because they get it. You know, with their free client for Windows, Mac, Linux, even Solaris, you get to use your very own Blowfish key, you know, the open source cipher from Bruce Schneier. And this way, nothing ever touches the network without first being encrypted. And not only can you use their free client to back up to your own external hard drive for free, but their secure offsite storage is truly unlimited. I know I've got terabytes up there. So as hackers, as geeks, as IT professionals, we all know the importance of offsite backups, and as Hak5 viewers, we're getting a very special hookup from now until July 31st, 2013. We're getting a huge discount on their 1-year unlimited plans. They normally start at $59.99 a year, but if you go to this very special page set up just for us at crashplan.com/hackitup, you'll get 20% off. That's a year of unlimited backups for less than $4 a month. It is never too soon to back it up, so I highly encourage you to take advantage of this July-only offer at crashplan.com/hackitup.
It's time for my favorite part of the show. This is the Technolust photo of the week. This one comes from Lewis. He sends us this photo of his new Wi-Fi setup and says, I bought this when I received my Wi-Fi Pineapple and thought you may want to see how everything is being used. I'm a network admin and I have been using it to do testing on the wireless networks I have implemented, and it's brilliant. I'm trying to work on a way to get this device reporting to a few Gentoo servers to paint maps of the wireless coverage around the buildings. This could be great for WLAN surveys. That's very cool. It's awesome to see you using everything for work. Very convenient. Now you can send your photos over to feedback@hak5.org and make sure to put in the subject line Technolust so that we can find them.